In the fast-moving, often unforgiving landscape of American pop culture, fame is usually a temporary lease, a brief moment in the sun before the inevitable cooling of public interest. Stars rise with dizzying speed, capture a specific cultural zeitgeist, and then slowly or suddenly fade away as the next generation steps forward to claim the spotlight. It is an industry designed for high turnover, where the tastes of audiences shift like sand, and where staying relevant for even a single decade is considered an extraordinary achievement. Yet, for nearly half a century, there has been a singular, immovable force at the absolute center of global entertainment. A towering figure who has not only survived 5 distinct decades of massive cultural, technological, and societal shifts, but has actively dictated the terms of those shifts, deciding who gets to rise alongside him. That man is Eddie Murphy. To truly understand his journey is to understand how a teenager from the working-class neighborhoods of Brooklyn and Roosevelt, Long Island, did not just build a highly successful career, but instead constructed a massive cultural empire. In doing so, he became the ultimate gatekeeper, the structural blueprint, and the premier kingmaker for multiple generations of comedy, drama, and screenwriting. His influence is so vast, and his longevity so unprecedented, that his footprint can be found beneath almost every major comedy career that followed him. This is the exhaustive chronicle of how Eddie Murphy wrote the rules of modern stardom and maintained his position as the final boss of American comedy. Our story begins in the winter of 1980. Saturday Night Live, which had spent the late 1970s as the rebellious, countercultural crown jewel of late-night television, was facing a sudden and seemingly certain death. The original, legendary cast, including John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Gilda Radner, had departed. The visionary creator Lorne Michaels had walked away, and the new season under a different production team was widely considered by critics and network executives to be a historic disaster. The ratings were in freefall, the writing was listless, and NBC executives were actively preparing to pull the plug on the entire late-night franchise. It was during this moment of absolute crisis that a 19-year-old stand-up comedian from Roosevelt, Long Island, walked into the audition room. Eddie Murphy was young, hungry, and possessed an electric energy that seemed to vibrate off his very skin. He was hired as a featured player, a low-ranking position on the show, but he refused to remain in the background. Within weeks, the raw power of his talent forced the writers and producers to put him front and center. With a brilliant, million-dollar, gap-toothed smile and an undeniable rock star swagger, he single-handedly rescued Saturday Night Live from the scrap heap of television history. Audiences had never seen anything like him. He did not just perform sketches, he commanded them. Characters like Mr. Robinson, a gritty, street-smart parody of Fred Rogers' Neighborhood, brought the reality of urban life into the sterile world of public broadcasting, delivering biting social satire dressed up as children's television. His transformation into Gumby, portrayed as a cigar-chomping, cynical, washed-up showbiz veteran who famously screamed that he was Gumby, damn it, subverted classic childhood nostalgia. And his version of Buckwheat turned an old, forgotten short film character into a modern, hyper-energetic pop culture sensation. Through these characters, Eddie Murphy proved that a young, uncompromising black performer could carry an entire network flagship show on his back during a time when television networks were incredibly segregated and cautious. He became the first breakout star of the 1980s to prove that black humor was not niche. It was universally dominant. By the time he left Saturday Night Live in 1984, he had established a completely new standard for television stardom. He was no longer just an actor working within an ensemble cast. He was a force of nature, a cultural phenomenon who had rewritten the rules of what was possible on late-night television. As the 1980s progressed, this explosive television energy translated seamlessly into unprecedented box office dominance. Hollywood had historically been highly skeptical of casting black leads in major mainstream films, often relegating them to sidekick roles or specific, isolated genres. Eddie Murphy shattered these invisible barriers with a succession of historic film releases. In 1982, while still a regular cast member on Saturday Night Live, he made his feature film debut in the buddy cop thriller 48 Hours, starring alongside Nick Nolte. His performance as Reggie Hammond, a fast-talking convict on a temporary release, completely hijacked the movie. The scene where he walks into a hostile, segregated biker bar, takes total control of the room, and intimidates the patrons remains a masterclass in screen presence and comedic timing. The following year, in 1983, he teamed up with Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places, a brilliant satire of American capitalism, classism, and race relations. The film was a massive critical and commercial success, proving that 48 Hours was no fluke. But it was in 1984 that Eddie Murphy achieved absolute, stratospheric superstardom with Beverly Hills Cop. Playing Axel Foley, a street-smart Detroit detective who travels to the ultra-wealthy, sterile enclave of Beverly Hills to solve his best friend's murder, Eddie created an archetype that would define the action comedy genre for the next 40 years. The film was an absolute juggernaut, grossing over $316 million worldwide and becoming the highest-grossing R-rated film of its era. By the age of 23, Eddie Murphy had achieved a level of leverage that no black entertainer before him had ever experienced. He signed an extraordinary, multi-picture deal with Paramount Pictures that granted him total creative autonomy and astronomical payouts. This was the precise moment he transitioned from being a mere movie star to becoming a true cultural gatekeeper. For the first time in Hollywood history, a young black man had the systemic power to greenlight films, approve multi-million-dollar budgets, choose directors, and decide who was allowed to walk through the studio doors. He was no longer asking for permission from the traditional white gatekeepers of studio boardrooms. He had become the gatekeeper himself. Simultaneously, during this period of cinematic triumph, Eddie was also redefining the art of stand-up comedy. Before him, stand-up was largely seen as a club-based medium or something filmed for low-key television specials. In 1983, he released Delirious, filmed in a bright red leather suit, followed in 1987 by Raw, filmed in an iconic purple leather suit. These were not just comedy specials, they were massive rock concerts. Eddie walked onto the stage to the deafening screams of thousands of fans, carrying himself with the physical confidence of Mick Jagger or Prince. He proved that a comedian could sell out massive arenas, dictate national fashion trends, and command the attention of the global media. Through Delirious and Raw, he laid down the aesthetic and structural blueprint that every arena-selling comedian, from Martin Lawrence to Chris Rock to Kevin Hart, would copy for the rest of their lives. As the decade drew to a close, Eddie realized that holding absolute power meant nothing if you did not use it to build a legacy for others. He understood that the traditional structures of Hollywood would always try to keep black talent isolated, treating his success as an exception rather than a new standard. In 1989, he decided to use his massive capital to write, direct, and star in Harlem Nights. The film was a deeply personal tribute to the generations of black comedians who had paved the way before him. He cast his childhood idol, Richard Pryor, alongside the legendary Red Fox, uniting 3 generations of black comedic royalty in a single, lavish period piece. It was a symbolic passing of the torch, a moment where the young gatekeeper paid his respects to the masters who had fought the system before him, while demonstrating that he now held the keys to the castle. Boomerang did something revolutionary. It presented a world of wealthy, highly educated, elegant, and successful black professionals, completely free of the urban trauma tropes that Hollywood typically relied on. By creating this space, Eddie showed the industry that films centering on black romance, style, and professional success were highly profitable. He did this again in 1999 with the brilliant, bittersweet comedy drama Life, which paired him directly with Martin Lawrence. The film, which tracked 2 friends wrongly sentenced to life in prison in the Jim Crow South, allowed Eddie to mentor and showcase younger talents like Bernie Mac, Anthony Anderson, and Bumper Robinson. Yet, even as he was building this empire for others, Eddie was also engineering a spectacular artistic self-reinvention. As he entered his late 30s, he recognized that the high-energy, foul-mouthed rock star persona of his youth would eventually hit a creative ceiling. He needed to prove that his genius was not dependent on adult-rated shock value, but was rooted in a deep, versatile mastery of character work, physical performance, and vocal variation. In 1996, he released The Nutty Professor, a reimagining of the classic Jerry Lewis film. What Eddie accomplished in this film remains one of the most stunning physical and technical feats in comedic history. Utilizing groundbreaking prosthetic makeup designed by Rick Baker, Eddie did not just play the lead character, the sweet-natured, morbidly obese scientist Sherman Klump. He played almost his entire family. He transformed into the loud-mouthed, overbearing father Cletus, the sweet and highly encouraging mother Anna, the foul-mouthed, incredibly active grandmother Ida, and the slow-witted, food-obsessed brother Ernie. He even played Buddy Love, the slick, arrogant alter ego of Sherman Klump. To watch the famous dinner table scenes in The Nutty Professor is to watch a single actor hold a complex, multi-layered comedic conversation with himself, giving each individual character a distinct voice, unique physical mannerisms, and a specific psychological depth. It was not just a collection of silly voices, it was a masterclass in acting. The film was a massive global blockbuster, earning over $270 million and winning an Academy Award for its makeup. Eddie followed this success with other brilliant character-driven comedies, including Bowfinger in 1999, where he played both a highly paranoid, high-strung action star named Kit Ramsey and his sweet, dim-witted twin brother Jiff. Through these films, Eddie proved that he was one of the greatest physical comedians of any generation, a performer who could completely disappear beneath layers of latex and still project a profound, deeply affecting humanity. As the world crossed the threshold into the new millennium, Eddie Murphy pulled off what is perhaps his most astonishing demographic coup. An entirely new generation of children, born in the late 1990s and early 2000s, had absolutely no concept of Eddie Murphy as the leather-clad, boundary-pushing stand-up comedian of the 80s. They did not know about Raw or Beverly Hills Cop. Yet, in 2001, they fell completely in love with his voice. With the release of Shrek, an irreverent, highly subversive fairy tale parody produced by DreamWorks, Eddie took on the role of Donkey, a hyperactive, sweet-natured, and endlessly talkative miniature donkey who becomes the reluctant sidekick to his cynical ogre. The film was a cultural earthquake, grossing nearly $500 million, winning the first-ever Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and launching a multi-billion-dollar franchise that continues to this day. For the generation of children who grew up in the 2000s, Eddie's voice was the comforting, hilarious soundtrack of their childhood. He had managed to capture the hearts of Gen Z and younger millennials without ever losing the respect of the older generations who had followed him from his gritty early days on Saturday Night Live. Then, in 2006, just as some critics tried to categorize him as strictly a family-friendly voice actor, Eddie reminded the world of his immense, raw dramatic weight. He accepted the role of Jimmy, Thunder, early in the film adaptation of the Broadway musical Dreamgirls. The character was a tragic, complex amalgamation of real-life music legends like James Brown, Marvin Gaye, and Jackie Wilson. Jimmy Early was a man caught between the raw, soulful roots of black music and the polished, sanitized demands of mainstream white pop success. By the time the 2010s arrived, Eddie Murphy had achieved a status that very few entertainers in history have ever reached. He had become the ultimate, mythical elder statesman of comedy, a figure of such immense stature that his very presence carried a heavy, almost sacred weight. He chose to step back from the relentless grind of the Hollywood studio system, releasing fewer films and protecting his privacy. Yet, his influence was felt everywhere, hanging over the industry like a protective canopy. He had become comedy's grand gatekeeper, the final boss that every rising star had to acknowledge. Superstars like Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and Kevin Hart frequently speak about visiting Eddie's home in Beverly Hills as if it were a high-altitude pilgrimage, a necessary rite of passage for anyone who wanted to claim the title of a comedy king. To sit in Eddie's living room, to listen to his stories, and to receive his advice was the ultimate validation in the comedy world. He was the standard against which all success was measured. If you were selling out arenas, Eddie had done it first, bigger, and in a purple leather suit. If you were signing massive development deals, Eddie had written the contract decades earlier. In 2015, the cultural establishment officially recognized this massive legacy when Eddie was awarded the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor at the Kennedy Center in Washington, District of Columbia. The audience was a veritable who's who of modern comedy, filled with performers from multiple generations who stood up to applaud a man who had cleared the path they now walked. It was a historic coronation, a public acknowledgement that Eddie Murphy had not just made people laugh, but had fundamentally reshaped the cultural fabric of the United States. But Eddie was not content to simply sit on his throne and collect Lifetime Achievement Awards. In 2019, the quiet giant decided to show the world that he could still run the field. He starred in Dolomite Is My Name, a deeply funny, warm-hearted, and brilliant biographical film about Rudy Ray Moore, the real-life pioneer of independent black cinema and comedy. The film was a passionate love letter to the grit, determination, and creativity of independent black artists who refused to take no for an answer from the mainstream establishment. Eddie's performance was electric, full of the joyful, infectious energy that had made him a star 40 years prior. The film was a massive critical triumph, reminding audiences and critics alike that when Eddie Murphy is motivated, there is no one on earth who can match his cinematic power. That same year, in December of 2019, Eddie completed one of the most highly anticipated homecomings in television history. For the first time in 35 years, he returned to host Saturday Night Live. The excitement leading up to the broadcast was unprecedented. When he walked onto the stage for his monologue, the studio audience erupted into a thunderous, minutes-long standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of Studio 8H. He was joined on stage by Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Tracy Morgan, and Kenan Thompson, creating a historic visual image of multiple generations of black comedic giants standing shoulder to shoulder, all looking up to the man who had made their careers possible. The episode was a spectacular success, drawing the highest television ratings the show had seen in years and earning Eddie his first ever Primetime Emmy Award. He brought back his classic characters, showing that even after decades away, his timing, his physicality, and his connection to the audience were completely flawless. He had bridged the final gap, connecting his original 1980s fanbase with a modern, internet-savvy 21st century audience. Today, as we look at his continued relevance in the 2020s, Eddie Murphy's legacy is no longer just a subject of historical appreciation. It is an active, ongoing blueprint for survival and artistic evolution. He has returned to his most legendary, beloved franchises, releasing highly successful modern updates like Coming to America in 2021 and Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley in 2024. These films are not simple exercises in cheap nostalgia. Instead, they are carefully crafted victory laps, calculated decisions by a master programmer who understands exactly what his audience wants and how to deliver it in a modern, streaming-dominated landscape. When we look back across the vast, sweeping arc of his 45-year career, we see a writer, actor, producer, and comedian who has successfully navigated 5 distinct generations of American life. He was the voice of the late baby boomers and Gen X during the rebellious, high-flying 80s. He was the master mentor and cultural architect for millennials during the sophisticated, creative 90s. He was the beloved, comforting voice of Gen Z during the digital animation boom of the 2000s. He became the revered, legendary master for a new wave of comedians in the 2010s, and he remains a vibrant, active kingmaker in the 2020s. Eddie Murphy is the ultimate gatekeeper, not because he closed the door behind him to protect his own status, but because he spent his entire life standing at the gate, using his massive leverage, his historic wealth, and his peerless genius to make sure the world had no choice but to let the future in. He broke down the walls of late-night television, shattered the glass ceilings of Hollywood film studios, rewrote the rules of stand-up comedy, revolutionized the art of animation, and established a standard of black excellence and artistic autonomy that will be studied, respected, and followed for generations to come. He is the eternal architect of the laugh, the living blueprint of stardom, and a monument to the enduring power of creative freedom. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching.